Captain Wang Ziyu, this island is too small, right? Pirate world, on a small island in the East China Sea, Wan Xian sits on a boulder in the middle of the small island, looking at ships that may appear around him. And beside Wan Jiu, there stood a child about 10 years old. If members of the Roger pirates were present, he would definitely recognize this child as the interned Shanks on the ship. Captain, shouldn't there be no boats here? The young Shanks was a little depressed. He and Wang Ziyu had been on this island for 3 days, and there was not much shellfish food left on the beach. If there is no boat passing by, maybe a few of them can only go into the sea to catch fish. Under the huge boulder where Wang Jiu and Shanks are, an old man with white hair is leaning on the stone and said to the two above, "Our position should be in the East China Sea, but where we are now, it should not be on the route, so there may not be too many ships here." "No way, Mr. Carp, don't we have to wait a long time to meet someone?" The young Shanks looked depressed after hearing the words of the old Carp below. "It is very likely that this is the case." The elderly Carp shrugged helplessly and replied to Shanks. After saying this, Carp stood up straight and walked to the beach on the island, saying, "There is not much food, it seems that I have to go to the sea to catch fish." "Mr. Carp, let me come, you are so old, don't go to the sea." When Shanks heard that Carp was about to go to the sea to catch fish and replenish food, he ran off the boulder and caught up to that old age. Carp sighed. For the enthusiastic Shanks, since the other party said so, Carp did not refuse. "Okay, then you go." Wan Jiu, who was still sitting on the boulder, looked down at the two people walking towards the beach. As long as anyone who knew the world had a look, they would know that these two people would never appear in the same era. But in front of Wan Jiu's eyes, this situation actually appeared. One is the Navy hero with snow-white hair, and the other is the red hair who has not yet become the 4 emperors. Of course, this is just the name Wan Jiu is in the world now. If you follow the identity of the world that these two people are talking about, it's a different matter. In the information that Wan Jiu got, these two people were both great pirates. Thinking of this, Wan Jiu directly opened the warehouse in his consciousness, which also contained copies of consciousness from various parallel time and space One Piece. After entering his consciousness, the first thing that caught Wan Jiu's eyes was the 800 One Piece warehouse above the warehouse gate. Although there are 800 copies of One Piece consciousness in this warehouse, it will take some time to bring them all to the world of One Piece Lord. Among the 800 doors in the warehouse, only 2 were lit, and these 2 doors belonged to the elderly Carp and the young Shanks. After Wang Ziyu walked into the warehouse, the first door had an introduction about Carp. Successfully copied, copy age 83 name, Monkey D. Kapu affiliation, 2451 parallel universe strength, SS Kapu, who was born in Windmill Village, didn't intend to be a pirate, but after the Windmill Village was destroyed by the bombardment of the Tianlong people, Kapu embarked on the path of a pirate. Because of its tyrannical strength, from the East China Sea to the Great Sea route, from the upside-down mountain to the New World, Carp's windmill pirates are invincible. Neither the navy nor the pirates, nor the noble Tianlongren, could stop Carp from advancing. After Carp conquered half of the New World, the world government finally realized that Carp was shaking the foundation of their rule. After the world government figured this out, they began to unite with the pirates to attack the windmill pirates that was the enemy of half of the world. Although Carp annoyed most of the pirates, some pirates still stood on his side. Roger, Edward Newgate and other pirates all chose Carp's side and fought fiercely with the joint forces of the world government in Dressrosa. This battle resulted in the death of the Golden Lion, Kaido and other big players. Carp, Roger, and Newgate divided the New World, and the navy pirates of the warring states, Steelbone, Z, Locks, and Charlotte Lingling and others retreated to the first half of the Great Route. As a result, Carp was dubbed the King of Pirates. Next to Carp's introduction, there is the second door with the name of Shanks. Successfully copied, copy age 11 name, Shanks affiliation, 1389 Parallel Universe Strength. B. Shanks was born in the West Sea, accidentally boarded the future One Piece Roger's fleet. From teenagers to youth, Shanks and Roger One Piece grew up together. Reading www.youcanshu.com also successfully reached the end of the Great Route. Since then, Roger has become famous throughout the world and is known as the King of the New World Pirates. However, Shanks did not serve as a crew member for long, because Roger died of illness in the New World and the country on his way back to the East China Sea. After Roger died of illness, the entire fleet also faced a crisis of dissolution, because Roger passed away too suddenly and did not designate his captain's successor. The crew members who had gathered together because of Roger also disbanded on the spot in the country of Wano, and went their separate ways. However, Shanks was still young, so he was stayed in Wano country by Mitsuki Mita. Shanks' talent is very outstanding. In just 3 years, Guanjiao Meishan has been unable to beat Shanks, who is half of his disciple. And half a year later, Shanks defeated Guanjiao Meishan and set up a red-haired pirate group from the country of Wano. After going out to sea, it took Shanks only 2 years to go from a One Piece's former crew member to the 4 emperors of the New World. After defeating Kaido and the Golden Lion, Shanks occupied nearly half of the territory of the New World. The defeat of the 2 New World emperors also made Shanks called the King of Kings by the Navy, which is second only to the pirate king Roger. Of course, Shanks himself doesn't seem to like this title. Wan Chiu had already read the introductions of these 2 people when they were copied over, so Wan Chiu just glanced at them when they passed by, and didn't check them carefully. After crossing the rooms of the 2 people who had been copied by Wan Chiu stood in front of the 3rd door. This 3rd-ranked copy of consciousness has not yet been completely copied. Although consciousness is already in place, the body is still being reshaped. The copy of the consciousness body is completed and is being reshaped. Except for the words reshaping the body on this door, there is only one name left below Don Quixote da Flamingo. Wangziu. This is also the first time I saw the name on this door. When I entered the warehouse last time, there was no name about the consciousness inside the door. It's actually da Flamingo. For the 3rd One Piece who will be awakened, Wan Chiu thought about Roger, Locks, and even Kaido, but he didn't really think that Kaiwahei such as Flamenco would also sit in the position of One Piece. It seems that everything that happens in each parallel universe will also have earth-shaking changes. After only seeing the introduction of the world in which Carp and Shanks are in, Wan Chiu also knows that the characters in these parallel universes have experienced some differences. Things. Maybe this Doflamingo directly defeated Ant Kaido and others and became One Piece. But it will take a while to see this progress bar. After several days of observation, Wan Chiu also roughly judged the time when Doflamingo was copied. If he counts correctly, Doflamingo should take about a week to be copied. Except for this door of Doflamingo, there are no signs on the other doors to be reshaped, not even the most basic names. If there is really no boat passing by, you can only wait for Doflamingo to go out after a week, but I don't know if this Doflamingo is a line fruit capable person. With no ships passing by, Wan Chiu can only put his hope on Doflamingo for the time being. If he is still a line fruit capable person, it will not be a problem for everyone to leave the island. After watching too many flamenco's progress bars, Wan Chiu withdrew from consciousness and returned to reality. At this time, on the beach in front of Wangziu, the young Shanks had jumped into the sea, ready to catch a few big fishes back. Captain Wangziu. Mr. Carp. There is a boat ahead. Shanks, who was swimming in the sea, suddenly turned around and yelled at Wangziu and Carp on the island. After hearing Shanks's shout, Wan Chiu quickly looked in the direction Shanks was pointing. There was indeed a big ship sailing in the direction pointed by Shanks. Red Nose. After seeing the flag on the ship, Wan Chiu smiled slightly and shouted to Shanks who was going ashore, "Shanks, it seems you are still an acquaintance." "What?" Shanks, who was catching a big fish in his hand, asked Wangziu somewhat puzzledly. At this time, Wang Jiu had already jumped off the boulder. He had obtained some of the abilities of Carp and Shanks, and he basically had no problems jumping at this height. I said that this ship is probably your acquaintance. Wang Ziyu walked to Shanks and patted the other person on the shoulder, and continued, "Go and light the campfire you prepared before. You will know when they come." "Okay, Captain." After hearing Wang Ziyu's order, the young Shanks threw the big fish directly on the beach, ran to the vicinity of the previous boulder in 2 or 3 steps, and directly lit the prepared bonfire. The ships sailing at sea immediately noticed the situation on the island after the bonfire was lit, and Wang Jiu's guess was not wrong. The pirate group with the red-nosed skull pirate flag was Shanks' old friend Bucky. "Captain! There are people on the island." Kabeji, the acrobat on the boat, first spotted the bonfire on the island of Wanshao. After the bonfire, he quickly reported to Bucky, who was resting in the captain's room. Even though Bucky, who was lucky enough to be Kabeji, was a little dissatisfied, he still walked out of the captain's room and looked in the direction of the campfire. "Is there really someone?" "Little ones, I have work to do, come closer." Bucky, who had been out of business for a long time, quickly commanded his helmsman to drive towards the island. He had not yet established himself in the East China Sea and needed to increase his bounty. Under Bucky's command, the ship quickly turned around and sailed towards the island. "Captain Wang Ziyu, they are here." The young Shanks, who had just finished lighting the bonfire, was very happy. After they had a boat, they would be able to leave this uninhabited island. "I see, this is a group of pirates, prepare to seize their ships." With Carp's existence, Wang Jiu didn't think the Bucky pirates had the slightest chance of winning. This Carp may be different from the Carp in the main world, but he is definitely of a superb level. Not to mention a little pirate in the East China Sea like Bucky, even if he is in the future, he will be able to fight. "Yes, Captain." Although Shanks is still young, he has already boarded Roger's ship at the age of being copied. As a member of the great pirate group, Shanks will not be afraid of the little pirates in the East China Sea. The East China Sea is still so weak. Carp, who had been silent next to Wang Jiu, said suddenly when Bucky and others began to land. The elderly Carp has been outside since the destruction of the World Windmill Village where he was in, and has never returned to the East China Sea after entering the Great Sea route. The only evaluation of the King of Pirates on the East Sea is probably a weak word. It's the weakest sea after all. Weaknesses are normal. Wang Jiu looked at Bucky and others who were walking by. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com said with a smile. While talking, Bucky has brought his pirate group members to the place where the 3 of them are. At this time, Bucky basically got rid of his sleepiness. When he looked at the other side intently, his whole person was stunned for an instant. Card, 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 card. Although Carp was wearing a black suit, not a navy uniform, he was equally lethal in Bucky's eyes. In the past, Carp fought against the Roger pirates countless times, and Bucky was too familiar with Carpna. Although Carp's head on the opposite side is all grey hair, his looks and body are absolutely correct. "Little guy, do you still know me?" Carp saw Bucky's nervous expression, and he walked forward slowly with his hands in his pockets. As soon as Bucky saw Carp's movements, cold sweat dripped from his head. "Captain." Not long after joining the Bucky pirates, Mackay, an animal trainer who had no experience, was a little puzzled by his captain's performance. "Kapu." At this time, Bucky finally pronounced Kapu's name clearly. Mackay and Kabaka next to Bucky's eyes widened when they heard the name. The name of Navy hero was hyped by the Navy. "Not bad, I really know who I am." Carp was very satisfied with everyone's performance. His name as One Piece also works in this world. Just as Carp nodded in satisfaction, Shanks also walked out from behind Carp, smiled and said to Carp, "Mr. Carp is really amazing." Bucky, who had been stunned, saw Shanks's figure, his mouth grew big, his eyes looked straight at the head behind Carp, fragrant, incense, Shanks. Buggy. The young Shanks, who had been standing behind Carp before, could see the opposite face clearly. Isn't this his partner when he was on the boat? But, it seems that the body is a bit wrong. Why is this guy so much taller than me? It's really you? Shanks. Bucky looked incredulous. How can this Shanks look wrong? How could you be so small? Are you not in the New World? Shanks? Captain, do you mean he is the great pirate Shanks in the New World? Mackay and Kabaka became even more uncomfortable. How come there are so many strong men on an uninhabited island? We were just taking a chance on the road, so why did we meet this kind of person? The young Shanks frowned when he heard what he called him, the big pirate Shanks. This Shanks was copied from his body and memory when he was 11 years old, so now his memory is still on Roger's pirate ship. At this time, he was just an intern. The title of a great pirate, only his captain and deputy captains have it. Hey, your name is Bucky, can you get on a boat? Wan Chiu, who hadn't spoken until now, walked to the side of Carp and said to the Bucky pirate group who had been stunned in front of him. Get on the boat. When Bucky heard Wan Chiu's proposal, his mind suddenly beaten up. Do you want to grab your own boat? Shanks might be a fake. Carp wanted to take him back to the naval base, right? Should I resist? Carp, with his hands in his pockets, saw that Bucky hadn't responded, so he walked directly to Bucky, staring at the little pirate in the East China Sea and said, What? Not willing. Bucky, who was interrupted by Carp, opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. Just when Bucky's brain was down, Carp lifted his left foot and stepped heavily on the ground. Boom! When Carp's left foot landed on the beach, the entire beach was like being hit by a meteorite, and a large crater appeared in an instant, and the surrounding sea water and gravel quickly splashed around. Originally thinking about the waves coming from everyone, it seemed that he was also afraid of Carp's power, turned his head, and rushed directly in the opposite direction. This! Bucky was taken aback by this scene. The big pit made by Carp was right in front of him. If Carp took a step forward, he probably would splash around like the sea water and gravel. Of course, Lieutenant General Carp can certainly get on the ship. After seeing Carp's deterrence, Bucky didn't tremble anymore. I saw that he respectfully stepped aside, giving way to Carp. But Carp didn't immediately walk in the direction of the ship, but said to Bucky, What, Lieutenant General? I'm not a running dog of the Denon. Hey! When Bucky heard this, his mind was confused again. Who are you? Not a Lieutenant Admiral? If you don't admit it, you're still swearing. Are you expelled by those Navy guys? What? Let your people get out of the way and let Captain Wang Ziyu pass. Carp was obviously very dissatisfied with Bucky, a pirate with an abnormal head, and stretched out his hand to push him aside. Bucky was said by Carp, and his eyes turned to the only one of the three people he didn't know, the guy whom Carp became the captain, Wang Ziyu, Captain. Bucky, you should be Bucky? This is our Captain Wang Ziyu. Shanks also walked up to Bucky at this time and introduced this former partner. Because of receiving too much information in a short time, Bucky has automatically shut up at this time and is not ready to say anything. After these people get on the boat, let's look at the situation. Because of Carp's performance just now, the group of pirates under Bucky didn't dare to act rashly after they had just gathered, so they boarded the boat with the three of Wan Chiu. Your boat is too small. The speed is too slow. Carp, who was used to his big ship, was not satisfied with the condition of Bucky, the pirate ship. As soon as the ship moved, he started to complain while sitting on the deck. Fortunately, Bucky is not in front of Carp at this time, and the running margin of his brain is not filled with Carp's words. In the pirate ship captain's room at this time, Bucky was accompanying Wang Ziyu and Shanks. Bucky, I didn't expect you to come to the East China Sea. Didn't you want to hunt for treasure? Shanks fiddled with Bucky's things in the captain's room and asked Bucky as he moved. Bucky glanced at Shanks, who was turning things. Although he was still not sure if this Shanks was the Shanks he knew, his mind started to complain, "If you didn't take mine, if the treasure map is lost, will it be what it is now?" Shanks saw Bucky not answering himself, so he turned to Bucky and asked, "Bucky, of course I'm going. I'm planning it." Bucky looked at the young Shanks with a look of resentment and said, "You reading www.yuyugonshu.com? Okay, Shanks, you'll be quiet first." Wanshu, who was about to ask Bucky about something, stopped Shanks, who was still turning, and said to Bucky, "Bucky, what is it now? Time? When?" Bucky was taken aback by Wanshu's question. "Afternoon. I'm not asking this, so how long has Roger died?" After realizing that his question was ambiguous, Wanshu asked again. After hearing Roger's name, Bucky and Shanks were both taken aback. But after a brief stupor, Bucky said, "Captain Roger has passed away for 17 years. Thinking of my former captain, even the big-hearted Bucky was a little embarrassed. Bucky and Shanks were taken care of very well during the Roger pirates." "What? It's been 17 years. Shanks still doesn't know the specific situation of this world. Although Wanshu talked a bit before, it was all about the Navy. It was the first time he heard about Roger's situation. "Say, I knew that this guy must be a fake. I didn't even know this, so I dared to pretend to be Shanks." Bucky looked at Shanks with a slight smile on his face, with a face he had seen through the other's expression. Boom! Shanks hit Bucky's chest with a punch, and after the punch he said, "Captain Roger is dead, you're embarrassed to laugh." Bucky, who was punched by Shanks, only felt a throbbing in his chest. "Damn it, the captain has been dead for 17 years, is it possible that I'm still crying?" "Okay, Shanks." Wanshu stopped Shanks, who was still angry, and continued, "Let's go out and have a look. Carp wants to go to the windmill village, so let's go first." "Right. Buggy, tell your people to drive to Windmill Village." Windmill Village. Bucky is also a little impressed with this village. After all, he has been in the East China Sea for many years, and he has learned a lot about many islands in the East China Sea. Windmill Village is the hometown of Lieutenant Admiral Carp, so few pirates go to catch the autumn wind. As a pirate in the East China Sea, Bucky certainly knows this. "Okay, I will go now." Although Bucky questioned Shanks' identity, the strength that Carp had just demonstrated was very powerful, and the Lieutenant Admiral should be true. Bucky didn't know why Carp would mix up with a fake Shanks, but if the other party wants to go to the Windmill Village, let's go together. It's best for Carp to let himself leave after arriving at the Windmill Village, so that he doesn't need to deal with Carp anymore. Under Bucky's command, the helmsman of Bucky Pirates also changed course, turning around and sailing towards the Windmill Village. Actually, the location of Windmill Village is not too far away from the uninhabited island of Kapu and others. In just 2 days, the Bucky Pirates took Wangziu to the pier of Windmill Village in the Kingdom of Goa. Pirate. There are pirates. When the ships of the Bucky Pirates were able to test their grades, the Windmill Village was a busy scene. The villagers here have not encountered unknown pirates for a long time, and the arrival of the Bucky Pirates really shocked the villagers. "What should I do? Mr. Carp is not here either." As the first combat force in Windmill Village, Kapu was first remembered by the villagers. However, the Lieutenant Admiral was not in Windmill Village at this time, and none of them could resist the attack of the pirates. As the mayor of Windmill Village, Slap, he first stood up to appease everyone. "Don't worry, let's first." "Wait, the one who disembarked is Mr. Carp." Slap, who was about to let everyone go to evacuate first, saw the few people who were disembarking, and suddenly stopped retreating. "Isn't that Mr. Carp?" "It looks like it is." The villagers who were going to run under the leadership of the village chief Spula also saw the existence of Carp. At this time, they were finally relieved. It turned out to be the pirate subdued by Mr. Carp. After everyone saw that it was Carp, they no longer felt nervous, and returned to their homes one by one, and the emergency state in Windmill Village was instantly lifted. Mr. Cap, Mr. Cap. Maginot of the Windmill Village pub was going to the mountain today to see Luffy and Ace. After seeing Cap approaching, he also smiled and walked over. Carp, who was walking behind Wanjiu, looked at Marquino in front of him, but he was at a loss. Does this person know himself? In this parallel universe of the old Carp, the village of Windmill was destroyed when he was young. At that time there were no such people as Maginot. Although Cap didn't know Marquino, he knew Slap, who was slower than Marquino. After seeing this acquaintance, Carp also smiled rarely. Slap. I can see the intact Windmill Village in this world, and an acquaintance like Slap, Carp is already very satisfied. For this Carp, this world is even more perfect than the world he was the One Piece King. At least, Windmill Village is still there. Although Maginot was ignored, he still smiled and said to Carp, Mr. Carp, are you going to Luffy today too? Luffy? You said that kid is in Windmill Village. Carp also has the grandson of Luffy in another world, but Luffy in that world is very different from Luffy in this world. When he talked about his grandson, Carp was furious. Of course, it just happened to be able to teach that kid well. Just when Carp was about to give Luffy an iron fist of love, Bucky, who was behind Wanjiu and the others, slowly moved in. Although Bucky's head is sometimes not very agile, after 2 days of sailing, he also knows that Wanjiu is the boss of the trio. Whether it was Carp or the fake Shanks, both of them would call this fellow Captain Wangziu. Since Wanjiu is the leader of the trio, he also directly approached Wanjiu this time. When Bucky approached, he whispered to Wanjiu, Wan, Master Wanjiu, look, can I leave? Bucky doesn't want to stay next to these 3 people all the time, his force must be unable to do the other side. Since he can't do it, then the first choice is definitely to run away. Now that the 3 of them have reached the destination Windmill Village, of course he, the pirate, doesn't have to stay any longer. Just as Bucky was talking, the young Shanks came over from the boat with a big bucket. Bucky, what are you talking about? When Shanks, who was holding the big bucket, passed by Bucky, he glanced sideways at his old teammate. Hurry up and help me move something down. Damn it! That's all my stuff. Although Bucky was very dissatisfied in his heart, there was no change in his face. I'm talking to Master Wangziu. What are you talking about? Do you want to go? The young Shanks put the barrel aside. You read www.yuyuganshu.com looked at Bucky with suspicion. He knew his friend very well. Master Wangziu said that he wants to requisition your ship, you can't leave. Bucky didn't respond to Shanks's remarks, and the fake guy was embarrassed to tell him this. Knowing that Wanjiu was the person who was talking to him, he went on to say to Wanjiu directly, Master Wanjiu, we have all arrived at the Windmill Village here, there is nothing wrong with us. In Bucky's gaze, Wanjiu nodded slightly and said, it's really nothing, you can go. When he heard Wanjiu's words, Bucky breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that he could finally leave. But before Bucky had time to be happy, Wanjiu said again, but leave the boat. What? Bucky was taken aback by Wanjiu's words. If he left the boat, how could he and others leave? Bucky, these people are all pirates, but they have to go to sea but they must have a boat. If there is no boat, they can't go anywhere. Master Wangziu, are you wrong? Bucky's face was cold with sweat, for fear that his boat would not belong to him. You can also continue to follow us. When you meet another group of pirates, you will have a boat. Wangziu has already understood this very well. When there is no second boat, he is not going to let Pakistan G and others drove this ship away. Damn it! Bucky had 10,000 kinds of dissatisfaction in his heart, but it was not easy to burst out. so he could only gritted his teeth and looked at the sky, meditating in his heart why he met such a group of people. Shanks? Is it Shanks? Just as Bucky was stimulated by Wang Ziyu, Maginot, who had finished talking to Cap, also saw Wang Ziyu and the young Shanks beside Bucky. "Ah, you are." Young Shanks looked in the direction calling his name, but what caught his eye was a woman with light green hair and a turban on her head. However, Shanks was not at all familiar with this Mackinaw who called his name. "Ah, aren't you Shanks? Sorry, I confessed to the wrong person." After yelling Shanks's name, Mackinaw felt a bit abrupt. How old is the kid opposite? How could it be Shanks? Shanks carefully observed the other party again, put his right hand on his chin and tried hard to think about it. After confirming that there was no such person in his memory, Shanks replied, "I admit it, I am Shank. Si, but I don't seem to have seen you before." This. Mackinaw had already acquiesced that the other party was not Shanks, but the other party suddenly admitted that for a while, Mackinaw didn't know how to answer. At this time, Wang Jiu walked next to Cap and said to Mackinaw, who was carrying a basket in his left hand, "Actually, I think it's very similar, but the world is sometimes so strange, right?" Although Wang Jiu said so, the village chief of Windmill Village Slap still frowned and looked at Shanks. Although the others' height and age are a bit wrong, they look too similar. "Okay, let's go and see that boy Luffy first." Carp beside Wang Jiu didn't care about his identity. At this time, he wanted to see what Luffy in this world looked like. "Yes, let's go and see Luffy with Mr. Carp." After several years of visits, Mackinaw is already very familiar with the location of Dodden's bandit house. During the visits all the year round, Carp had already known that Mackinaw and Slap were feeding Luffy and Ace. That's why Mackinaw dared to mention going to Dodden's bandit house in front of this Carp. "Bucky, you can follow up too." In order to prevent Bucky from running away with the boat, Wang Jiu did not let off the captain of the pirate regiment who was held hostage by them. Bucky, who had already made up his mind to run away, was yelled by Wang Jiu, and suddenly felt that the hope of leaving had diminished. "Here, do I have to follow along?" "Of course." After Wang Jiu nodded in response, he raised his leg to follow Mackinaw and the others, and said to Shanks behind him as he walked, "Shanks, take care of you friend, don't let him left behind." "Yes, Captain Wang Ziu." The command of the young Shanks' own captain was carried out unconditionally. After Wang Ziu finished speaking, he kept his eyes on Bucky, his former teammate. "You pretend to be a fake." Bucky had never believed in Shanks's identity. After all, this Shanks was too far apart from the Shanks he knew well. "Bucky, I will return it to you when I find the treasure map." Shanks saw Bucky staring at him unhappy all the way, thinking that the other party was complaining that he had lost his treasure map. "Things. How do you know? It's normal to know that you like treasures, but basically no one knows that Shanks lost his treasure map." Shanks smiled slightly, because he was not tall enough, he could only pat Bucky's arm. "We are friends." Bucky was stunned by Shanks' words. Is it possible that this guy is really Shanks? However, Shanks had already gone to the New World, and he couldn't be so young. 2 days ago, I saw Shanks, who was already known as the Four Emperors, in the newspaper. Thinking of this, Bucky lowered his head and leaned over to Shanks and said, "Who are you?" "Shanks really? You fellow, am I still a fake?" Shanks gave Bucky a blank look, and quickly followed Wang Ziu and Carp ahead. Shanks' answer made Bucky wonder how to think for a while. What's the matter with this world? Is it my problem or this Shanks' problem? Bucky's thinking did not last long, because as soon as he stood still, Shanks in front of him had already called out his name loudly. In order not to be beaten by Cap, Bucky could only follow him quickly. The Gorbo bandit stronghold in Dodden from Windmill Village is not very far away. It didn't take long for everyone to see the outside of the Gorbo bandit house. Luffy, Ace, As soon as he came outside the Gorbo bandit stronghold, Mackinaw shouted the names of Ace and Luffy. Maybe Maginot had already agreed with these two little guys a time to come every week, so the two of them didn't go out. After hearing Maginot's voice, the two of them rushed straight out of the woods next to them. Come out! Haha, I said I will come soon. Luffy jumped in the air and laughed, seeming to be happy that he guessed right. But his happiness did not last long. Before he landed, he glanced at a familiar figure, which was like a body spell. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com made Lu Fei freeze his body at the first moment when he appeared. It fell straight to the ground. Before he finished speaking, Luffy fell directly in front of Carp, and looked at the white-haired elderly Carp with his mouth wide open. Master, Grandpa. Boom! When Luffy was in a daze, the elderly Carp, like the naval hero of this world, punched Luffy in the head. Ah! Why hit me? Luffy hugged his head and rolled on the ground. Compared to the somewhat funny Luffy, Ace landed steadily on the ground, staring coldly at Wang Xiu, Shanks, and others in the team. Although Luffy was born smoothly in the world of the One Piece King Carp, the One Piece's grandson did not join his own pirate group, but went to start some revolution with his father Durag. Although the incident of Durag could even hit the rule of the Drago Knights, Carp still wanted Luffy to stay on his pirate ship. Who is that again? After Luffy stood up from the ground holding his head, Carp also saw Ace coming out with Luffy. I don't know Kapu about poor Gas de Luyu, so let alone her son Ace. Regarding Cap's question, Maginot said in a puzzled manner, Mr. Cap, that's Ace. Ace. Carp frowned and thought of the name, where he seemed to have heard it. But before Carp remembered who Ace really was, Dodden rushed out of the Gorbo bandit stronghold and arrived in front of Carp. Mr. Carp. You are here. Okay. Carp looked at Dodden, he had no impression of the bandit. Mr. Carp, you'd better pick up Ace and Luffy, they are getting more and more troublesome. Now Ace and Luffy are getting older and older, and their level of troubles is gradually rising. A few days ago, a huge python was introduced here, and Dodden, the thief's den, was almost turned off. Dodden, with a nose and tears, looked up at Carp after he finished speaking, but this look was unbelievable. Why did Mr. Carp suddenly become so old? The hair that was still a bit grey is now completely snow white. Carp, who was being watched by Dodden, was a little moved about this proposal. Take it away, it's a good idea. What? Luffy, who had just stood up, suddenly widened his eyes when he heard that Carp was about to pick him up. No. I'm not going. Luffy was afraid that Carp would take him to the navy. If he was taken away by his grandfather, he would probably be sent directly to the navy headquarters. In this way, what chance do I have to be a pirate? Boom. Elderly Carp punched Luffy on the head again. You just need to be honest and obedient. No. I don't want to be a navy. Luffy yelled and hurriedly turned around and rushed into the forest behind him. He didn't want to be picked up by Carp just like that. Standing in front of the Dodden Mountain Bandit, Ace folded his arms and looked at Carp's direction with some confusion. This Carp seems a little different. And after taking a look at Carp, Ace also turned and chased in the direction of Luffy. After the two kids left quickly, Carp stood there with an angry expression. This kid. How dare you just run like this? Carp was quite dissatisfied with Luffy's leaving without authorization. Okay, let him be here. Now this little guy is too young. Wang Xiu and Carp have different ideas. Now Lu Fei is only in his early 10 years old, he is not going to take this Luffy got on the boat. After Wang Xiu finished speaking, Mackinaw and others also said to the side, yes, Mr. Carp, Luffy is still too young. Mackinaw thought the same as Luffy, and she also thought that Carp was going to bring Luffy to the Navy headquarters. If Luffy is really picked up, Maginot can imagine what kind of inhuman training Luffy will receive. You guys! Boom! Before Carp could speak, there was a loud noise in the direction of Windmill Village. What's the noise? The village chief of Windmill Village, Slap, instantly turned and looked in the direction of Windmill Village. This level of noise must be unusual. Is it possible that another pirate has come? It's kind of like the sound of a cannonball. Bucky squinted slightly and said to himself. When Bucky said that, Slap and Mackinaw in Windmill Village suddenly became nervous. If the sound of the shells were real, then Windmill Village might be in danger. At this time, the two of them can only look at Carp for help. Mr. Carp. I heard it. Of course Carp also heard the noise from the Windmill Village, but he is not the pirate king of the last world now, he still has Captain Wangziu on his head. Captain Wangziu. Wangziu, who has seen Luffy and Ace, doesn't plan to stay at the Gorbo thief's stronghold. After he nodded to Carp, he said, let's go over and take a look. Mr. Carp. Don't go. Be sure to take Ace and Road away. When Wangziu, Carp, and others were leaving, Dan shouted loudly behind them. But the few who left didn't seem to want to take care of the bandit. No matter how she shouted, none of the people who left turned to answer. And because Slap and Marcano were very worried about the situation in the Windmill Village, they were led by these two people, and everyone was much faster than before. It's the Navy. Do they regard the pirates captured by Mr. Carp as pirates attacking the village? When the pier of Windmill Village came into view, the village chief of Windmill Village Slap also saw clearly over the pier. Circumstances: a Navy ship is confronting the Bucky pirates on the dock. Looking at the shattered side of the Bucky pirates, the sound of the cannon just now was probably made by the Navy. Damn it! My boat! That cost me a lot of money. Bucky saw the pirate boat that had been shot, and he burst into tears. Boom! Boom! Just as Bucky was speaking, the Navy's two guns shot in the direction of Bucky pirates. I don't know if it was the bad luck of the Bucky pirates or the Navy's artillery skills. Two shells hit the mast of the pirate ship and one hit the bow of the pirate ship. Ah! My ship! As the two guns hit, Bucky wailed again. At sea, the Navy that shelled the ships of the Bucky pirates is also observing the situation on the shore. This Navy ship does not come from the Navy headquarters of the Great Sea Route. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com is not Kapu's fleet either. They were only instructed by the Navy headquarters to the East China Sea Division Navy in Windmill Village. Lieutenant, it seems to be Lieutenant General Carp. The watchman on the Navy ship saw Carp appearing on the pier, and quickly came down and shouted to his officer. What? Lieutenant General Carp. After hearing the words of the watchman, the supreme officer of the Navy ship quickly picked up the telescope and looked towards the pier. It's really Lieutenant General Carp. Isn't it true that Lieutenant General Carp? Will you be back in a few days? The Navy of the East China Sea Division also came to inspect after receiving the news from the Navy headquarters. They had to make sure that when Carp returned, the village of Windmill was not attacked in any way. Could it be that Lieutenant General Carp came back early? The lieutenant frowned, completely unaware of what was going on now. However, the lieutenant did not think for too long. He stopped the gunner while he was still shelling. Stop shooting. Since Lieutenant General Carp is in Windmill Village, then this group of pirates must have been captured by Lieutenant General. It's shelling. Ashore, we. Lieutenant was about to let his men dock to meet Carp, but the pirate king Carp on the shore grabbed a head-sized rock directly from the ground, threw it hard, and threw it in the direction of the Navy ship. Boom! The stone thrown by Carp was more powerful than the Navy's shelling power. When the stone hit the side of the Navy ship, a terrifying hole appeared directly on the ship. Kapu! Lieutenant General Kapu attacked us. The lieutenant on the Navy ship looked at the pier of Windmill Village in an incredible manner. Although the ship was attacked, he did not want to understand why Kapu will attack yourself. When the navy of this naval branch was captured by the Bucky pirates, they had not yet figured out why Carp, the naval hero, would directly sink his ship. These navy fluttering in the sea don't know what the situation is, and the villagers of Windmill Village on the shore are also incredible. Caw, Mr. Carp. Slap, the mayor of Windmill Village, grew his mouth and looked at the sunken ships in the sea. Are they fake navy? Now Slap's mind is automatically helping Carp to explain. Since Carp has attacked the group of ships with naval flags, it is very likely that the opponent is a fake navy. Pretending to be? No, they are the navy. Carp, who sank the navy ship, patted the dust on his hands. This kind of navy of the naval branch is not challenging for Carp at all. Slap and Marcano don't know what to say now. Is there something wrong with their understanding, or is the world changed? Bucky, these navies will be handed over to yours. Wan Chiu doesn't want to deal with the navy being captured by the Bucky pirates. We will stay in Windmill Village for a few days, and then go directly to Rog Town. Right. To the Wangziu team, the East China Sea is not challenging at all, and the entire East China Sea branch absolutely cannot find an existence that can stand against this elderly Carp. Even though this Carp is 83 years old, his strength still belongs to the top presence in the pirate world. Carp is very supportive of Wan Chiu's proposal, and he still wants to teach Luffy from the Gorbo bandit. And Shanks didn't care about it. It didn't matter to him to stay there, as long as he followed Captain Wangziu. Although Bucky was thinking about how to leave Wangziu and Carp, but there was a gap in strength. He didn't even have the qualifications to speak, so he could only perform the tasks given by Wangziu. After Carp attacked the navy, the villagers in Windmill Village had no idea how to communicate with the One Piece King Carp. Fortunately, Carp spent the next few days looking for Luffy at Mount Gorbo, but he didn't show up in Windmill Village much. Wangziu didn't follow Kapu all over the mountains. He basically took Bucky and Shanks in Mackinac bar. Carp's departure gave Bucky an urge to leave directly, but Wan Chiu's gaze made the former Roger pirates in turn feel a sense of fear. Since Wan Chiu is the captain who doesn't know if it's real Cap, then his strength is definitely not bad. If I run, will he? After a series of fierce struggles in his mind, Bucky finally chose to stay in Windmill Village instead of leaving directly with his subordinates. Shanks! Shanks! In Mackinaw's bar, Bucky was sitting by the window and shouted to the young Shanks who was still next to Wangziu. Shanks, who was drinking the juice, looked back at Bucky by the window and asked, "What's the matter?" Bucky did not directly answer Shanks' question, but beckoned to Shanks. Shanks didn't know what Bucky was going to do, but he took his glass of juice and walked to Bucky's table. "What's the matter?" Shanks, who sat across from Bucky, looked at his old friend who was a few laps older than he thought, and asked. After a few days of getting along, Shanks has gradually adapted to Bucky's current appearance. Although he also knew that Bucky was a little different from the Bucky he was familiar with, it would be nice to have someone he knows in a new world. "Where's Master Wangziu? Why didn't you see him?" Bucky had been sitting in Mackinaw's bar all morning, but he didn't see Wangziu. Shanks shrugged and said, "I haven't seen Captain Wangziu either. Maybe he's still on board." That's it. After confirming that Wangziu was not nearby, Bucky's brain became active again. Since Wangziu is not here, do I have a chance to take the boat away? Thinking of this, Bucky also acted immediately. Carp and Wangziu are not there now, only fake Shanks is here in the tavern, which is a good opportunity for him to leave. After looking at it again for 4 weeks, Bucky said to Shanks again, "I'll go see where Master Wangziu is. You stay here first." Young Shanks doesn't doubt that he has him. Since Bucky is going to find Captain Wangziu, let him go. And just when Bucky was about to return to his pirate ship to leave, in the captain's room of Bucky Pirates, Wan Xian was browsing the pirate warehouse in his consciousness. Standing in front of the third door of the warehouse, Wangziu looked at the introduction of Don Quixote da Flamingo on the door and the progress bar that was about to end. He nodded slightly, "Copy da Flamingo's countdown. It's finally over." After almost a week, the body of Doflamingo, the copy of consciousness located at the third door, is about to be reshaped. The introduction on the door has already been fully displayed, and all the past of this Doflamingo is also written on this door. Name, Don Quixote Doflamingo. Affiliation, 1752. Parallel universe. Strength, S. From birth, Doflamingo, who is a Tian Longren, is a real master. But because of his father's decision, Doflamingo lost the privilege of being a Draco. However, even if he lost his identity as a dragon, Doflamingo still did not compromise. He and his younger brother occupied the island of Punkhasad in the New World and started his legendary life. Whether it's Kaido or Shanks, or Durag of the Revolutionary Army, they all need to purchase some items from Doflamingo, from man-made fruits to news and newspapers, from arms to intelligence. Although Doflamingo did not occupy the entire New World, he rules the dark side of the New World. Kaido Whitebeard and others occupy the land of the New World, and Doflamingo controls the lifeline of the New World. He is the most important part of the fight between the pirates and the Navy, and he is also an underground predator that all navies cannot avoid. He is the king of the underground of the New World. Don Quixote Doflamingo. This is the first time that Doflamingo's complete introduction to Wangziyu has been read. Wangziyu is also very much looking forward to the king of the underground that is about to be copied. It turned out to be an underground king, but he is similar to Doflamingo in this world. Doflamingo in this world is also doing business in the underground world, but for the underground king who is about to copy and control the entire underground world, Doflamingo in this world is still weak. Lair. Lieutenant General Carp. A pirate ship was found over the windmill village. Just when Wangziyu and Doflamingo discovered Carp, the Navy ship, the Navy on the warship also discovered Bucky's pirate ship. Pirate ship. After asking suspiciously, Carp, who was sitting on the deck of the warship eating donuts, stood up and looked in the direction of Windmill Village. Compared to this large naval ship, Bucky's pirate ship is a bit smaller. But Carp's eyesight was good, and he locked Doflamingo on the pirate ship at a glance. Doflamingo? How could this guy be in the East China Sea? Realizing that something was wrong, Carp even put down the donuts in his hands. This saw the admiral frowned and said to the adjutant next to him, "Let the ship move over, I want to see Dover." "What is Brother Ming doing in Donghai?" "Okay, sir." After receiving the order, Carp's lieutenant hurried to command his subordinates. Carp's warship is much faster than Bucky's pirate ship. So when the pirate ship docked at the dock, Carp's warship also docked at the dock in Windmill Village. Kapu, it really is Kapu. When Bucky saw Kapu in the uniform of the Navy headquarters on the opposite warship, his head, which was originally not fast, was almost paralyzed. There is a Carp in Windmill Village. Now there is another Carp. Which Carp is the real one? This question is not only for Bucky. Those villagers in Windmill Village who saw the arrival of naval ships also had the same expression. Why is there another Mr. Carp? I saw Mr. Carp go into Mackinac bar just now. Why are you on the Navy ship now? Are there two Mr. Carp? The villagers of Fengch village finally realized that something was wrong after a while, and there shouldn't be two Carps in a world. One of them is fake. After reaching this conclusion, both the village chief of Windmill Village Slap and the ordinary villagers cast their suspicions on Wangziyu and the pirate Carp who had come to Windmill Village earlier. After all, the Lieutenant General Carp who had just arrived was carrying a Navy ship, but Wangziyu was carrying a ship of pirates. Although Wangziyu, Bucky, and others did not do anything to harm Windmill Village, these people sank a Navy ship before. At that time, the villagers of Fengch village were still convinced that the pirate king Kapu was real, so they didn't have too much suspicion. But it's different now. Since the Lord has appeared, people like you Wangziyu are very doubtful. Slap, what's the matter with these people? As soon as he boarded the pier, Lieutenant Admiral Carp quickly asked the mayor of Windmill Village. These people? Slap didn't know how to talk about it for a while. After a short pause, Slap pointed to the direction of the Mackinac bar and continued to cap. There is also a guy who looks exactly like you, and you can't say exactly the same, and his hair is whiter than yours. Slap did not listen carefully to the words behind Slap, but he heard the words of someone who looked like him. What? Is there someone who looks the same as me? Carp was a little surprised. Could anyone in the East China Sea dare to impersonate himself? Tap. Tap. Just as Carp was talking to Slap, there was a sudden sound of leather shoes on the blue stone from the direction of the Mackinac bar. Slap followed the sound, and it was the pirate Carp who had been to the Mackinac bar just now. After seeing the Carp from another world, Slap stepped back and pointed at the pirate Carp and said, "That's it, it's him." Hey! With a hint of doubt, Carp also turned his head and looked in the direction of the pirate Carp. And when the Lieutenant Admiral and the pirate Carp looked at each other, both of them suddenly burst into a strong sense of war. The two caps are really interesting. When the two caps confronted each other, on the other side of the dock, Doflamingo, who also got off the boat, also looked at the strange scene with interest. The black clothes are our own people. Let's go. It is estimated that he will not be able to deal with it alone. Wan Qiu didn't know the level of Carp's strength in this main world, but the one he copied over. Carp is in a state of advanced age. Although he is still strong at the age of 83, his strength will not decline due to his age, but after all, the age difference between the two is 12 years old, and Wan Qiu does not know if it will be affected. Although the pirate Carp who was copied is definitely stronger than Doflaming next to Wan Qiu, his opponent is the world's top combat power, the naval hero Carp. Go! Hurry up! The village chief of Fengch village, Slap, saw that something was wrong, so he hurriedly shouted to the villagers behind him. After Slap's voice, the entire dock fell silent for an instant. All the villagers in Windmill Village quickly left the dock, leaving only the two groups of Wang Xiu and Carp. After the villagers of Fengch village left, the two Carps of Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com did not hesitate. So, as the last villager left, the two stepped forward together, the transparent armed colors gathered on their respective iron fists, and they quickly smashed towards the other side. Boom! A huge roar suddenly sounded as the two iron fists collided, and the rock on the dock was instantly shattered and lifted up, covering the two of them. If it weren't for the villagers to leave, the sound blast would have shaken them all over. The little ones in the Bucky pirates are a good example. The pirates under Bucky were recruited at will. These pirates from the East China Sea had no fighting power at all. After the two Carp fisted, most of the Bucky pirates fell to the ground. Wang Xiu can withstand such an impact because he has acquired some of the abilities of Carp and Doflamingo. So strong! I can actually fight with Lieutenant General Carp. The front seamen on the Navy warship held on to the railings of the warship's deck tightly to prevent themselves from falling backwards. Was as shocked as these navies, and there was Bucky hiding behind Wang Xiu and Doflamingo. He didn't expect the counterfeit to be so strong that it could be compared with the genuine one. After the dust dissipated, the two Carps were still standing in their respective positions. However, compared to the unmoved Lieutenant Admiral, the pirate Carp obviously took a half step back. Who on earth are you? Carp also realized the strength of the opponent. Although the punch he had just had the upper hand, the strength of the opponent can also be seen to be very powerful. How could such a powerful figure appear in this weak East China Sea? Moreover, he pretended to appear in Windmill Village. What was the purpose of the other party? If the opponent impersonating himself is weak, Lieutenant Admiral Carp will guess the other party's intentions at once, and the other party is at best coming to the Windmill Village to cheat and drink. But after the pair of punches just now, Lieutenant General Carp felt the opponent's powerful strength, not to mention the East China Sea, it is also rare in the Great Sea Route. Even if this person who looks the same as his appearance enters the team of the four emperors, his strength is definitely among the best. The Lieutenant General Carp's question was not answered by the pirate Carp. Instead, Behind him, Wang Jiu said from a distance, "Why, Admiral Carp wants to know us." After hearing Wang Jiu's voice, Carp looked back in Wang Jiu's direction and said, "It seems that you are the leader." While Carp looked at Wang Jiu, Doflamingo, who was standing next to Wang Jiu, also smiled and said to Carp, "Of course, it seems that you don't know our master Wang Jiu yet." Wang Jiu. Lieutenant General Carp stared at Wang Jiu, and at the same time searched for the pirate group related to the word Wang Jiu. But after Carp recalled all the pirates he knew well in his mind, he didn't find anything related to Wang Jiu. Wang Jiu did not let Carp continue to think about it. When the other party had no clue, Wang Jiu said directly, "We are just a small pirate group in the East China Sea. It is normal for Lieutenant General Carp to not know each other. Little pirates in the East China Sea." Kopyuko didn't believe Wang Jiu's statement. Not to mention the East China Sea, even the pirates from all over the world can't find a strong opponent like the pirate Kapu. "Since you are not going to speak, then go to Impeldang to speak." After Lieutenant General Carp shouted, he jumped into the air and jumped in the direction where Wang Jiu was. Doflamingo saw Lieutenant General Carp rushing towards Wang Jiu, and he quickly raised his hands, "Five-colored line." At the same time that Doflamingo's voice sounded, several almost transparent silk threads attacked in Carp's direction. "It's Doflamingo." Lieutenant Admiral Carp saw the way Doflamingo attacked, and he knew that this man was the real Kaiwahadian Yasha. If the appearance and attack method can be imitated, the power of the devil fruit is absolutely impossible to imitate. Each kind of devil fruit will only appear one at the same time. Since this person uses the ability of the thread fruit, it is definitely Doflamingo. After confirming that the opponent was the real Doflamingo, Lieutenant General Carp directly used the armed color domineering to resist the attack of the five-color line, but also because of Doflamingo's attack, Carp jumped into the air. "When I fell down." At the same time as Lieutenant General Carp fell, Wang Jiu's one-piece King Carp also followed him, and attacked Lieutenant General Carp with one punch. "Lieutenant Admiral Carp, be careful." When the nearby Navy soldier saw this situation, he hurriedly shouted. Actually, there is no need for reminders from the Navy soldiers. Lieutenant General Carp himself has already sensed the danger behind him through his domineering experience. With a cold vest, he quickly turned around, and the two fisted again, making a roar. Bucky was scared by the sudden shock and took a few steps back. Facing this level of confrontation, he could only sigh tremblingly, "Damn, these people are too strong." Bucky, who has been in the East China Sea for more than 10 years, has rarely seen attacks of this level. If you insist, Bucky has only experienced such a battle when he was an intern in the Roger Pirates. As his opponent, Carp has always stood on the opposite side of Bucky. Suddenly, Bucky thought he had returned to the days when he was an intern in the Roger Pirates. Can these people be like Captain Roger? Looking at the people fighting together, Bucky couldn't help but imagine the future of Wang Jiu. But the battle ahead did not make Bucky think for too long. A huge gravel suddenly flew out of the battlefield between the two Carps and went straight to Bucky's direction. "Why did you come to me?" Bucky was so startled that his feet were soft, and he almost fell asleep on the ground. But it was just such an operation. The boulder did not cause any damage to Bucky. Instead, after jumping over Bucky, it hit the Navy ship on the rear dock. Boom! The sideboard was hit. "Hurry up! It's leaking!" Because of being suddenly hit by a boulder, the naval soldiers who were still on the warship started to take action and began to rescue the warship that had traveled thousands of miles from the Navy headquarters. Just when the surrounding spectators were hit by the pond fish, the center of this battle was an even fiercer battle. The two Carp and Doflamingo, as well as Wang Jiu who obtained some of the abilities of Carp and Doflamingo, are all members of this storm center. However, because the battle site was on the boundary of Fengch village, both Carps held a little bit of strength, for fear that they would destroy Fengch village directly with too much force. In this case, Doflamingo, who hadn't taken care of him, fought more handily. Every time Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com attacked, he didn't have any power. In order to prevent Doflamingo's attack from hitting the windmill village behind, the two carps have to block Doflamingo's range of fruit ability from time to time. This guy is also blocking. Lieutenant General Carp, who had just blocked one of Doflamingo's 5 color lines flying towards the tavern, glanced at the pirate carp on the right front, somewhat puzzled. It stands to reason that this guy who pretends to be himself should not protect Windmill Village. But now it seems that the other party's behavior is the same as his own. What the is it for? Lieutenant General Carp couldn't figure out for a while, why these pirates came to his own Windmill Village. Just as Lieutenant General Carp was thinking, the pirate carp came to Wang Ziya's side. "Captain, this is Windmill Village, let's not continue fighting here. In my own parallel universe, Windmill Village has been destroyed once. Since the Windmill Village in this world still exists, the carp under Wang Jiu certainly does not want the Windmill Village to be affected and destroyed by his own attacks." Wang Ziyu glanced at the already empty Windmill Village, nodded and said, "Okay, it just happened that the naval ship had a problem, and we could not catch up without the navy. Because of the damage caused by the huge boulder just now, Carp's ship has already started to roll. In a short time, this warship should not want to move yet. Although the pirate carp wants to stay in this Windmill Village for a while, the guy who looks exactly like him is too difficult to deal with. If you don't have to do your best, you can't tell the winner." But the battlefield was in this Windmill Village again, and both carps were a little restrained. "Then go first.